film opened with a total gut punch, a flashback that was a certified nightmare. A young boy was a total mess, watching in horror as a train screamed toward him. His friend was tied to the railroad tracks, and the boy, whose name was Ethan, desperately tried to warn his friend that time was running out. He was trying to get his friend's limbs free, but it was a lost cause. The sound of the train was a total monster, a constant reminder that he was too late. The scene ended with a flash of light. The film then jumped to the present, introducing a new character, a man named Caleb, who was on a job. He was a building materials delivery man, but he was also doing an inspection at a construction site. The contractor was a total nervous wreck, and his fear was a total enigma. It was a weird scene, considering Caleb was just a simple delivery guy, but it was clear there was something more to him. It was then revealed that Caleb's boss was a total monster, a mafia kingpin who controlled the city's construction projects. All the contractors had to go through him, or they would face the music. As expected, the contractor was a total idiot, a guy who had tried to pull a fast one and got caught. He had been buying his materials from another store. In a total panic, he tried to bribe Caleb, a desperate attempt to keep his secret safe. Caleb took the money and went back to the warehouse, a place that reeked of dust and desperation. He tried to lie to his boss, Benji, but it was no use. Benji saw right through his flimsy story. When Benji asked for the details, Caleb couldn't come up with anything, and he finally confessed. Benji was livid. He immediately ordered Caleb to go back to the site and teach the contractor a lesson. Caleb tried to get out of it, saying that he had promised to take his daughter to the park, a simple promise that meant the world to him. But Benji wasn't buying it. He didn't care about Caleb's personal life. All he cared about was getting his revenge. He knew that Caleb was the only man for the job, a guy who had the guts to get it done. The request wasn't an option, it was an order. Caleb was a dead man walking if he didn't follow through. At the same time, in another part of the city, a politician named Lyle was introducing the city's new police chief, Chief Alberts. He was telling everyone that the new appointment was for the good of the city, but it was all a lie. The whole thing was nothing but a political deal that was set up to benefit Lyle and his friend, Chief Alberts. It was clear that the city was a total dumpster fire, run by a bunch of corrupt politicians and criminals. The night came too soon, and Caleb was haunted by the memory of missing his date with his son Barron. He went to his ex-wife's house, and in a total gut punch, she thought Barron had been with him all along. It was then revealed that Barron was the boy from the train tracks. A total nightmare come true. The police had been searching the scene, but the speed of the train had made it impossible to identify the body. When Caleb got to the scene, he hoped it wasn't his son, but his hope was a lost cause. He couldn't bring himself to believe that the boy was his son, but his ex-wife, Jackie, immediately recognized a piece of clothing, and she was a total mess, blaming Caleb for everything. He had failed at the one thing that mattered, being a father. To make matters worse, one of the detectives suggested that Barron's death was a murder, a total assassination by one of his business rivals. The suggestion was a total knife to the heart. Caleb denied everything, a guy who knew that he was a gangster, but a gangster who had no personal enemies. He was known for his ruthlessness, but never held a grudge. As the detective continued his questioning, he revealed that Barron was last seen with two of his friends. One of them was Ethan. Caleb was a man possessed. He tried to ask Ethan about what happened to Barron, but the boy didn't seem to care that his friend was dead. He hid behind his father, the politician, Lyle. The entire situation was a total mess, a political cover-up that was being orchestrated by the people who were supposed to protect the city. The entire thing was a total mind game. Caleb couldn't believe that a 10-year-old would act so cold, and the entire thing was a total blur, a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. The next day after the funeral, Caleb went to his boss, Benji. He needed to see the interrogation results, and he knew that Benji had a man on the inside. Benji's power was a total marvel, a guy who could get anything he wanted, but this case was a total hot potato. It involved the son of a high-ranking official, and Benji had to be careful. The detective on the case, a man named Navarro, had just moved to the city, and he wasn't interested in playing politics. He was a total professional, and he was close to solving the case. But in a total backstabbing betrayal, his supervisor, a guy who had been bought and paid for by Lyle, suddenly closed the case, declaring Barron's death a suicide. Navarro didn't believe it for a second. He went to talk to Caleb. He wanted to know what kind of kid Barron was, but at that very moment, Jackie saw the news on TV, saying Barron's death was a suicide. It was a total gut punch to them. The next day, Lyle was on the campaign trail, working the crowd like a seasoned pro. His son Ethan was right there with him, putting on an innocent act for the cameras. But when a friendly woman approached, a cold, empty stare crossed Ethan's face. He just muttered something unsettling under his breath before she moved on. At that very moment, Caleb appeared, cutting through the crowd and heading straight for the boy who had witnessed his son's death. But just as he got close, Ethan retreated behind his father, and the police detail immediately stepped in, dismissing Caleb and forcing him away. Still searching for answers, Caleb went to the house of Barron's other friend, the second witness. The front door was locked, but Caleb was beyond caring about rules. He broke in through a bedroom window, his mind set on finding any scrap of evidence. He tore through the room, desperate, until he finally found it. A shocking piece of drawing of the scene. The picture inside was a gut-wrenching look into the final moments of his son's life. Caleb took the evidence and headed straight to his boss, Benji, hoping for some kind of help. He laid out the whole story, explaining the chilling discovery he'd made and how Ethan's testimony was a pack of lies. But Benji's loyalty only went so far. He heard Caleb out but refused to get involved. Getting tangled up in a political scandal with Lyle was a business risk he wasn't willing to take. The refusal was a knife in Caleb's heart. He felt utterly alone, a father betrayed by the man he had worked for years. It was in that moment that Caleb realized he could not count on anyone but himself to get justice for Barron. Over the last few days, Caleb's world had collapsed. He was a man drowning in grief, haunted by the memory of missing his date with Barron and the constant, jarring sound of trains passing in the night. To make matters worse, the news of Ethan's behavior continued to spread. The boy, seemingly getting away with murder, had taken to putting ants in his friend's backpack, a cruel and disturbing act. Filled with a fresh rage, Caleb found Ethan at his school the next day. This time, there was no hiding. Caleb confronted him, but Ethan remained a defiant and manipulative little punk. He looked Caleb dead in the eyes and coolly repeated the lie that Barron's death was a suicide. Just as Caleb reached his breaking point, Ethan took off. A chase ensued, drawing the attention of many people. But in a chaotic twist, Ethan ran into the street and was hit by a car. He was knocked unconscious, giving Caleb the perfect opportunity to grab him and make a clean getaway. After a long drive, they arrived at a secluded house. The place felt isolated, a perfect hideout. As they got out of the car, Ethan put up a fight, but Caleb was a step ahead of him, anticipating the move and quickly overpowering the boy. Caleb led Ethan to a small, isolated room and began to interrogate him. He was a man driven by rage, but the boy just stared back, even mocked him. He refused to give up any details about what happened to Barron, which pushed Caleb to his breaking point. The veneer of control slipped away as he got a little too rough. News of Ethan's disappearance was all over the media. His father, Lyle, was ready for his close-up, preparing to face the press. Before he stepped on stage, Chief Alberts warned him to stick to the official statement, but Alberts forgot that a politician's true talent is going off script. Lyle used the conference to play the victim, shedding crocodile tears and begging for the public's help. He even announced a massive reward for his son's safe return. The whole thing was a grand show for the public, but behind closed doors, Lyle had warned police not to escalate the search. He was a man who didn't want the governor or anyone else poking around in his business. Back at the secluded house, Caleb's need for answers warred with his humanity. Even though he was furious, he couldn't let the boy starve. He brought Ethan a simple dinner and tried one last time to get him to talk, but the boy was a little monster, acting like he had the upper hand. He challenged Caleb to do his worst, a little punk with a big mouth and no fear. Caleb, running out of options, left the house and drove to a friend's place to borrow some tools. He knew it was a long shot, but he was desperate for anything that would make Ethan crack. At the same time, Detective Navarro was a man on a mission. He showed up at Jackie's house again, his gut telling him that Barron's death was anything but a suicide. He had found a photo of Barron smiling, a moment of pure joy that made him doubt the official story even more. He tried to get Jackie to help him find Caleb, hoping she would tell him where her ex-husband might be hiding. But Jackie was done with the police and the lies, so she turned him away. The next morning, with no other options, Caleb took Ethan to the basement.
Walk! Put your hands around the fucking pole.
The air was cold and the place felt like a dungeon. Caleb gave him one last chance, but the boy, defiant as ever, looked at him and smirked. In a final act of desperation, Caleb brought out the menacing contraption, but the moment he saw fear in the boy's eyes, he broke down. He was a man in an impossible situation. He couldn't bring himself to hurt a child, even if he believed that child was a murderer.
You think you're scaring me?
What happened to Barron? Tell me! I'll take you back!
Caleb's whole world was falling apart, and he was ready to give up and just send the kid home. But then, in a surprising twist, Ethan looked at him and said he would rather stay with him than go back to his own family. The film cut to Benji. The mafia boss was in a cold fury, a man on the warpath. He couldn't believe Caleb had the guts to kidnap a politician's kid. Benji saw the act as a direct threat to his entire operation, and he was taking no chances. He immediately sent his best men to find Caleb's hideout. They didn't take long to find the remote house, but instead of barging in, they planned a much more sinister strike. They were going to make it a special job, a covert operation to take out two birds with one stone. Back to the secluded house, Ethan suddenly broke down, confessing that he felt responsible for Barron's death. He admitted that from the very beginning, he had tried to save his friend, but he was just too scared of his own father to tell the truth. It was a shocking revelation that gave Caleb a moment of doubt. At the same time, Lyle was relaxing on his yacht when his father, the governor, showed up. The old man wasn't there to worry about his grandson. Instead, he was there to lay down the law and make sure the whole mess didn't cost them the upcoming election. It was a cold, brutal exchange that revealed the depth of their family's corruption. To make matters worse, the governor revealed that Ethan was adopted and Lyle had taken him in when he was just 6 years old. Just as Lyle was about to give up on finding Caleb, his phone rang. It was Benji. Meanwhile, even after Ethan's confession, Caleb was still skeptical. The kid had lied so many times, it was hard to trust him now. He decided to let Ethan go in the morning and end the whole ordeal. But as Ethan changed into a new set of clothes, Caleb noticed something that changed everything. The boy was covered in bruises. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Caleb finally believed Ethan. He let the boy sleep in a proper bed while he stayed on guard, watching a late-night show. A few hours later, 3 assassins silently infiltrated the villa. They were hired to kill Caleb and make it look like an accident. They sabotaged a gas pipe and had 2 bombs ready to go off, planning to make the whole house go up in flames. The assassins moved like ghosts, but Caleb was a step ahead of them. He ambushed them and grabbed Ethan, and they both made a break for it through a window. But the assassins didn't stop. They kept firing, and it was a shocking moment when Caleb realized they were also trying to kill Ethan. It was in that moment that Caleb knew the truth. Ethan wasn't a witness. He was a target. As they were running for their lives, one of the bombs went off, turning the house into a raging inferno. Ethan kept muttering that his father was trying to kill him, a terrifying confession that Caleb couldn't deny. The boy was hit by a bullet and collapsed, leaving Caleb to carry him to safety. The next morning, Lyle and Benji met to talk business. Benji was fuming, and Lyle was just as angry about the botched hit. Benji had only agreed to the murder in the first place because Lyle promised him a goldmine of a business contract. But with the mission in shambles, Lyle was close to pulling out of the deal entirely. At the same time, Caleb took Ethan to his friend's workshop. Felix, a kind-hearted man with some first aid experience, checked on the boy. To their relief, the bullet wound wasn't as bad as it looked. The kid was going to be okay. Meanwhile, the police were crawling all over the burned-out villa. Chief Alberts was furious with Detective Navarro, chewing him out for not doing his job. He yelled at Navarro for not checking Caleb's property records, claiming they could have found the location much sooner. The whole scene was a political circus, and it was a mess. On the other hand, Caleb was so exhausted he fell asleep. When he woke up, Felix handed him a bag and car keys, telling him he had to get out of there. The police would find the place eventually, and Caleb knew he was a wanted man. Felix didn't ask a single question, but he knew exactly what was going on. He told Caleb that Ethan kept saying how Caleb had saved him. Felix had seen the bruises on the boy, and he knew something terrible had happened. Ethan finally agreed to tell Caleb the truth about Barron's death, but he had one condition. Caleb had to take him somewhere first. At the same time, the police were back with Jackie, and Detective Navarro was trying to get her to cooperate. Jackie had a tough exterior, and she wasn't giving in, so Lyle showed up and put on a little show for her. He spun a sob story about how worried he was about his son, and as a mother, Jackie fell for it. She felt bad for him and was ready to give up Caleb's location. But on the other hand, Navarro was furious that his boss, Chief Alberts, had let Lyle interfere with the case. He protested, but his protests were ignored, and he was taken off the case. Caleb took Ethan to the aquarium, a place that held special memories for him and his son, Barron. As they walked through the exhibits, Ethan finally began to talk. He told Caleb about his strange habit of collecting spare change he found on the street. A strange beginning to a confession that would change everything. The full story finally came out, and it was a gut punch that left Caleb reeling. For years, Ethan had secretly collected coins, saving every last one in a big glass jar, a tiny defiant act of hope in his chaotic life. When he finally filled it, he showed it to his father, thinking he would be proud. But Lyle saw only a threat. He accused the boy of being a thief and beat him senseless, leaving the deep purple bruises that Caleb had seen. Ethan revealed that just a week before Barron's death, Barron had come over and witnessed the whole thing go down. In a complete panic, Lyle grabbed both boys and drove them out to the train tracks, and the rest was history. Ethan had tried to tell Chief Alberts the truth, but his testimony was changed. It was then that Ethan knew everyone was in his father's pocket. With the police on their tail, Caleb took Ethan to a small, run-down motel on the outskirts of the city. In the dead of night, he called Jackie, hoping she would help. Caleb felt a deep sense of compassion for Ethan, and he planned to leave the boy with his ex-wife, thinking she would be the best person to protect him. What he didn't know was that Jackie had already agreed to work with the police. The motel manager also saw the news on TV and reported them, but luckily only Detective Navarro showed up. Jackie, who was about to betray Caleb, had a last-minute change of heart when she heard the sincerity in his voice. She warned him not to go back to the motel, to run. As Navarro was chasing them, Ethan saw an opening. He tricked the detective, and in a moment of pure genius, he helped them both get away. With nowhere else to go, Caleb went back to Benji, a move that was a massive miscalculation. He laid out the entire story, hoping his boss would help him. But Benji sided with Lyle. The truth was that Benji was getting a big cut of the political pie. The whole thing was a setup, a trap that Caleb had walked right into. Benji promised to help Caleb hide Ethan in a neighboring country, but Ethan, in a moment of pure desperation, begged Caleb to come with him. Caleb told him he couldn't, that he had a dark past and a secret he had kept from everyone. He revealed that he had killed his own father, a man who had abused him, just as Lyle had abused Ethan. The only person who knew the truth was his uncle, Benji. When Benji called Caleb to the back room, the trap was sprung. Caleb thought he was saying goodbye to Ethan, but the truth was much darker. Benji was holding a recording of an interrogation with Philip, the other boy who was at the scene. In the recording, Philip said that it was Ethan who had tied Barron to the tracks, that he had choked Barron until he was unconscious. The whole story was a total lie, a twisted fantasy that Ethan had cooked up to get a get-out-of-jail-free card. After watching the recording, Caleb's heart shattered into a million pieces. The betrayal was too much to bear. He looked at Ethan with a cold, murderous fury and was seconds away from ending it all right there. His mind was a battlefield.
Stop fighting, Caleb. Now you can thank me, Caleb. I said stop fighting.
Torn between his anguish and the desire for revenge. But before he could act, Benji's men grabbed him. The boss himself went to work on Caleb, giving him a beating he would never forget. A normal person would have been left for dead, but since they were family, Benji showed a twisted kind of mercy. He warned Caleb to get out of town and never come back, or his life was forfeit. Meanwhile, Ethan came to in a pristine hospital room. Lyle was there, looking relieved that his secret was still safe. Ethan might have lied about Barron's death, but the bruises on his body were a grim testament to the abuse he had suffered at the hands of his father. Lyle, in a celebratory mood, took Ethan straight from the hospital to a high-class party where the city's elite were clinking glasses and celebrating their victory. It was a sick joke, and to top it all off, Benji was also there, laughing with Lyle like they were old friends. Caleb was a broken man, both physically and emotionally. The beating was nothing compared to the betrayal he felt. He was at a small diner, a ghost in a desolate city. Tears streamed down his face as he stared into his coffee. His dreams of justice shattered. He was just about to give up when his eyes landed on a painting of fish on the wall. It was a simple piece of art, but it reminded him of his son Barron and the aquarium where they had once found a moment of peace. It was a punch to the gut, a moment of clarity that reignited a fire in his soul. With a newfound purpose, Caleb got up and walked out of the diner. The thugs Benji had assigned to watch him, scared to get in trouble, didn't report the incident. But as the party was in full swing, Benji saw Caleb there. He immediately warned Lyle. Lyle panicked and made a break for it with Ethan. He ran like a coward, heading straight for his yacht, What they didn't know was that Caleb was a step ahead of them. He was already at the pier, waiting. This wasn't about killing a man. It was about getting justice for his son. He wasn't after Lyle's life, but his soul. He wanted Ethan. He told Lyle that if he wanted to live, he had to give him his son. In a shocking act of cowardice, Lyle didn't hesitate.
Yeah, you got a deal. And then turn yourself in. Is that right? Here, take it.
He was ready to sacrifice his own son to save his skin. Just as Caleb was about to take Ethan away, Detective Navarro showed up, putting the entire operation on ice. The whole pier was a total war zone, a chaotic mix of blaring sirens and gunshots. But before the chaos, Caleb had secretly planned with Detective Navarro to expose the ugly truth behind Lyle's abuse of Ethan. In a final, desperate move, Lyle tried to kill everyone. The gun went off and Caleb was hit, but in the chaos, Navarro got the upper hand. In a moment of righteous fury, he shot Lyle, ending his reign for good. On the other hand, Caleb's luck ran out. He fell into the water, and despite his large frame, he couldn't swim. But Navarro jumped in and saved him. When Caleb finally woke up, he was in a hospital bed, alive. Why did he save the boy who had lied to him, the boy who had caused him so much pain? It was thanks to Felix's words. He remembered what Felix had told him about revenge, that it would only bring him more grief. He realized that Ethan wasn't a monster, but a deeply disturbed boy who had been abused his entire life. He knew what that felt like, and he couldn't let his own trauma make him into a monster. He hoped that by showing Ethan compassion, he would make Barron proud. In the end, Caleb was arrested for kidnapping. The media had a field day with the story, but Caleb didn't care. He was a man who had found his peace. Ethan was taken to a rehabilitation center, and the police were still searching for Benji, who had gone into hiding. As Caleb was being transported to jail, the police car stopped in a secluded alley. The two officers who were with him just got out and left him alone. Soon, two men in black suits walked up to the car, ready to kill him. It was a classic hit, a move that was meant to keep the powerful people involved in the case safe. Caleb understood his fate and didn't fight back. He accepted his fate, a man who had finally found his peace. He was ready to meet Barron on the other side.